The madness of March never disappoints. Another look at the top 4 seeds in each region. Now, the number at the bottom of each region is the total when you add up the overall seeds of the 4 teams listed. So in theory, the lower the number, the more difficult the region. So upper left with Auburn. There you go. Joining us now for their insights into the selection and bracketing process are Bubba Cunningham and Keith Gill, the chair and vice chair of the NCAA Men's Division I Basketball Committee. Bubba, what would you say was the most difficult challenge the committee faced this time around?
Well, there were a number of challenges, and just congratulations to so many outstanding teams. And it's always the hardest part of any bracketing or selection is that, you have to make a cut somewhere. And fortunately, this year, there were so many outstanding conference champions, and either the first or second team in each of those leagues won. So we had a lot of opportunities to go a little bit deeper with some of our teams that were on the bubble than we've had in past years. But it's always a really fine line that you draw at the end.
So, Bubba, congratulations on being done, first and foremost. I am very familiar with all of the protocols and procedures inside that committee room. You guys go to great lengths to make sure there are no conflicts of interest. You are the athletic director of the University of North Carolina in your day job, so it's going to be a natural question for people who don't know all those procedures to ask whether North Carolina may have gotten a little bit of an advantage that their AD is a chair. So I'm going to invite you to answer that question, and then maybe if Keith could shed some light on that discussion.
Well, thanks, Seth. And obviously, I'm going to defer that to Keith. But, all the policies and procedures were followed, and Keith can address exactly how North Carolina was discussed, because I was not in the room for any of that.
Yeah, thanks, Bubba. And Seth, I appreciate the question. As the vice chair, I managed all the conversations that we had about North Carolina, and we had quite a few. Our policies require the AD of any school to recuse themselves and actually leave the room for those discussions. And they're not allowed to participate in any vote as well. So we followed those, had lots of discussions about North Carolina. Saturday night, we took our final vote, and we voted in 4 teams in the field on Saturday night, and we had a contingency vote. And the contingency vote, that was the last team in the field. And it was based on Memphis and UAB. If Memphis won that game, then that was going to free up a spot in the tournament, and that was going to be North Carolina. If UAB had won, then Memphis was going to be in the tournament, UAB would have been in the tournament, and North Carolina would have been the first team out. And so that process played out today. Memphis won, and that put North Carolina in the field.
Great answer. Bubba and Keith, Jay right here. Thank you for your work, and I want to ask you, there's 14 SEC teams. There's 3 opportunities that they could play each other in the second round. Can you explain any adjustments that had to be made with bracketing to take on 14 teams from one conference?
Yeah, great question, Jay. And we spent a lot of time on that today. We didn't move anybody off of a seed line, but we really had to move people around to minimize the conflict early. And when you have, 4 different regions, we made sure we only had 4 teams in one region so that we could spread them out the best we could. We had a couple of contingency brackets, and we actually had 5, and so we had to go back and then try to rework the bracket a little bit, again, keeping everyone on the same seed line to move them apart the best that we could. But you're right, 14 teams out of one league in a 68-team bracket is a real challenge to get everybody in there and meet all of the principles that we have about trying to keep the teams apart.
Bubba, congratulations. I know this is arduous work, but I would like to go back to a more general question around those teams that are on the stoop as it relates to the discussion. If you could give us a little more sense with the addition of more metrics in the toolbox, what was that discussion like with those teams that ended up being on the outside in the last 4 or 5 spots?
Yeah, well, we have a lot of metrics. We added a couple of this year. We added Torvik, we added the WAB, and those were the ones that were discussed frequently. All of the predictive metrics, the results-based metrics have been around for quite some time, and so we used a few additional ones. But you're right, the last 4 teams that were out, it was a tough call. The next team out was West Virginia. and they had an outstanding year. And unfortunately, Tucker DeVries was hurt, and player availability is something that we talk about quite a bit. And then it just, Indiana was close, Ohio State was close, Boise was close, and we had a lot of conversations about those teams as well. But yeah, as I said at the onset here, that's the hardest part of being on the committee is having to draw that line. But with only one real upset this year, there were an awful lot of teams on the bubble that got in. And last year, as you guys all know, that we had 5, and so we couldn't go very deep into the to that pool.
Bubba, Keith, this has been very insightful. We thank you, and we congratulate you for getting to the end of this process. Thank you very much.